Imagine walking through a forest 50,000 years ago. In the distance, someone is watching you. They stand upright, they carry tools, they wear animal skins, they light fires, they care for their families. At first glance, you'd probably think they were another person. But they weren't Homo sapiens, they belonged to another human species. It sounds impossible today. Yet for much of the last few 100,000 years, Earth wasn't home to just one kind of human. It was home to several. Some were shorter, some were stockier, some lived in freezing Ice Age Europe, others survived on tropical islands. One group even had, on average, slightly larger brains than modern humans, although bigger brains didn't necessarily make them more intelligent. Then, they all disappeared, except us. So what happened? Did we defeat them? Did nature erase them? Or is the real answer far more surprising? Let's rewind time. In Europe and Western Asia lived the Neanderthals. Farther east lived the mysterious Denisovans, known mostly from ancient DNA and a handful of fossils. On the Indonesian island of Flores lived the tiny Homo floresiensis, often nicknamed the Hobbits. In what is now the Philippines lived another small-bodied relative called Homo luzonensis. Meanwhile, our own species, Homo sapiens, evolved in Africa around 300,000 years ago, before gradually expanding across the globe. For thousands of years, these different human species overlapped in time. They weren't apes. They weren't our ancestors in a straight line. They were our evolutionary cousins, different branches growing from the same family tree. If you met one, you'd likely recognize them as remarkably human, but sharing the planet didn't mean sharing the future. For a long time, scientists imagined Neanderthals as primitive cavemen who were simply outsmarted by modern humans. Today, that picture has changed dramatically. Neanderthals crafted sophisticated stone tools. They hunted enormous Ice Age animals. They controlled fire. They cared for injured group members who could no longer hunt. There is evidence they sometimes buried their dead and may have created symbolic objects. In other words, they weren't failures of evolution. They were highly successful humans who survived hundreds of thousands of years in some of Earth's harshest environments, which makes their disappearance even more mysterious. If they were so capable, why didn't they survive? The answer probably wasn't a single catastrophe. Most researchers now think several forces acted together. Around 60,000 to 70,000 years ago, Homo sapiens began spreading out of Africa into Europe and Asia. At the same time, the climate was changing dramatically. Ice sheets advanced and retreated. Forests became grasslands. Habitats shifted. The animals people depended on also moved. Different human populations increasingly found themselves competing for many of the same resources. Small groups became isolated. A few difficult winters, poor hunting seasons, lower birth rates. Any one of these pressures could push already small populations closer to extinction. But competition wasn't always violent. Sometimes, it looked like family. One of the greatest discoveries in human evolution came not from fossils, but from DNA. When scientists sequenced the Neanderthal genome, they uncovered an extraordinary surprise. Neanderthals and modern humans had children together. They weren't completely separate after all. Today, most people with ancestry outside Africa carry about 1 to 2% Neanderthal DNA, while some populations in Oceania inherited additional DNA from Denisovans. That means these ancient humans didn't vanish completely. Part of them lives on inside billions of people alive today. Their story wasn't only extinction, it was also assimilation. Some populations disappeared because they became part of us. But genetics alone cannot explain why only one human species ultimately remained. The biggest advantage may have been something far less visible: cooperation. Homo sapiens appear to have built unusually large and connected social networks. Groups exchanged tools, shared ideas, passed knowledge across enormous distances. A new hunting technique discovered by one community could spread to many others. A better spear design, a safer campsite, a new way to process food. Ideas traveled farther than individuals ever could. Knowledge became something that accumulated across generations instead of starting over each time. Many scientists believe this cultural flexibility gave modern humans an enormous advantage. When environments suddenly changed, it wasn't necessarily that we were stronger or smarter. It may have been that we learned from each other faster. Then there was another invisible challenge: disease. Whenever isolated populations meet, they exchange more than culture and genes. They also exchange pathogens. Scientists are still investigating how much disease contributed to the disappearance of other human groups. There isn't enough evidence to say it was a major cause. But for already small populations facing climate change, competition, and limited genetic diversity, new diseases may have added even more pressure. No single explanation solves the mystery. Instead, researchers increasingly see it as a perfect storm. Climate, competition, interbreeding, small populations, changing environments, possibly disease. Each factor alone might not have been enough. Together, they changed the course of human history. Now imagine standing in Ice Age Europe 45,000 years ago. A Neanderthal family sits around a fire telling stories after a successful hunt. Only a few valleys away, another fire burns. Modern humans, for generations, both worlds existed together. They hunted, they explored. Sometimes they competed, sometimes they cooperated, sometimes they became family. Then, slowly, one population became smaller, the other spread farther, until eventually, only one human species remained. But perhaps that's the wrong way to think about it, because we are not the last humans simply because we defeated everyone else. We are the last surviving branch of a once diverse human family. And every time you look into a mirror, you're seeing the result of countless encounters between different human worlds. The Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and other ancient relatives did not disappear without leaving a trace. They helped shape who we are. Which means the story of humanity was never about one species standing alone. It was always a family story. And a small part of that family is still looking back at you.